Hello, hello! I hope you're all enjoying Wilsathon. I, for one, am very hyped about it, if you couldn't tell from the huge bunches and the iconic Tracy Beaker jumper that I have. Eternal thank you to Carys for finding on Etsy. I am obsessed with it. I'm living in it. This is where I live now, in the bog off jumper. So if you don't know by now, I am co-hosting Wilsathon with some lovely ladies, some of my favourite people on booktube. I will obviously leave all of their links down below, and as part of the readathon, obviously we're reading as much Jacqueline Wilson as we possibly can, and tweeting about it, doing vlogs. As part of that, we also wanted to upload a video on each of our channels about our favourite Jacqueline Wilson book. Anyone who knows me knows that I am hella indecisive, so I knew right from the beginning, right when we started floating this idea around about doing this video, that I would not be able to pick just one favourite Jacqueline Wilson book. That just was never gonna happen. So I have a little stack of like 5 or 6 to talk about, and I'm just now realising that none of the books in my little stack are Tracy Beaker books, which is crazy. I'm basically like cosplaying as Tracy Beaker. I have Tracy Beaker on my bog off hoodie, and I have no Beaker books in my pile. I feel like a fraud. But I promise the books that I do have to talk about are all incredible and as iconic as the Queen Tracy herself, I promise you. So the first book I have to talk about is My Sister Jodie by Jacqueline Wilson, one of the ones that I am rereading for Wilsathon for the Reread Your Favourite Book prompt. And for years I thought this was my favourite book because it just stuck in my brain. The ending is harrowing and sad, and it just stuck in my brain for a very long time, and I think that's why I thought it was my favourite for years. And I am rereading it as part of Wilsathon to like see what I think of it now. Is it actually my favourite, or did it just traumatise me and therefore I remember it? But like most of my favourite Jacqueline Wilson books, this book contains sisters, and I remember it is an older sister, Jodie, and a younger sister, and they move to this new boarding school. I think one of their parents gets a job working at the school, so then the kids have to kind of up and move with them and they stay in the school. From memory, I should really read the back. I mean, what am I doing? So yeah, Jodie is the big, bad, cool big sister, and Pearl is her kind of quieter, meeker younger sister who, loves her to bits, but obviously, just kind of goes along with what Jodie says and what Jodie does. And once they arrive at this new school, the roles start to switch a little bit, and it's Jodie who starts to feel kind of left out, and Pearl who is making friends. And I think I love this book because I have been both Pearl and Jodie at different points in my life. Like, Pearl is the meek, quiet, kind of shy girl, and then Jodie is like who I wanted to be. And I've been in situations where I've like been the one that's been left out, and I've been in situations where I've known that someone else has been left out and I don't really know what to do about it. Like, I feel like this book hits a lot of those strings. Like, I never had sisters, obviously. I'm going to keep going on about it because I'm bitter that my parents never had any more children, but I definitely related to that within friendships, like either being left out myself or, there being power shifts and power dynamics and feeling like you're kind of not able to stop it or influence it, And let's just be shallow for a moment. The cover of this one is absolutely stunning, and it just is one of those books that will always stay with me. Like, I just remember being so shocked at this book. Oof, Miss Wilson. She knows how to do a twist. My next favourite is Candy Floss by Jacqueline Wilson. They're all by Jacqueline Wilson. Why am I saying by Jacqueline Wilson? And looking at these books, I realised that I remember very specific details from them. So I don't remember like the general plot, but for example in this book, I remember that in her room, Candy Floss has a chest of drawers that is only half painted silver because her dad promised her that he would paint her drawers like a magical silver colour, but then they ran out of paint and he promised he'd get some more, and then he never did, so her drawers are only like half painted. And obviously that's a very specific detail, but I think that's just a testament to how intricately Jacqueline Wilson weaves the worlds of her characters. Like, I remember these bedrooms felt so lived in, and I remember also reading Clean Break, and that book starts at Christmas, and Jacqueline Wilson describes every single thing that she gets in her stocking, like a little pot of nail varnish, a pen, a bookmark, like some fruit or some sweets, and their lives just feel so layered. Like, no detail is too small, and those always stuck in my brain because it just makes the story just feel real and textured. Like, these are real kids with real bedrooms that you could like wander through and pick up little knickknacks and things like that. Like, Jacqueline Wilson has a knack for knickknacks. She always describes little figurines that are on a bookcase or a chest of drawers or over the mirror or on the curtain rail. Like, she always has an eye for that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think the actual plot of this is interesting, as well as the chest of drawers element of this book. And this follows obviously Candy Floss, and she has some trouble fitting in school. She's kind of friends with the wrong crowd, and I remember she's kind of sort of not really friends with this annoying girl who like keeps putting on an American accent, and I remember finding that really funny because there were definitely people at my school that would like put on weird accents to try and seem cool. Like, you know, people that went to like America or somewhere on their summer holidays and then came back like thinking that they were all cool and tanned and like they had a different accent, and you were like, you were gone for a week. That's not enough to change your accent. And I think the overwhelming theme of this book is friendship. It's, you know, Candy Floss feeling lonely and, you know, feeling like she doesn't really belong in her group of friends, and her sort of friend sort of abandons her for the popular girl, and then she makes friends with a much quieter, lovelier girl, and then they go to a fairground. I think this is what this is all in reference to, and at the fairground they have a chip butty, something else that's just ingrained in my brain from like 10 years ago. I remember because I asked my dad what a chip butty was when I was reading this because I didn't know. The next book I want to talk to you about is The Diamond Girls. I'm so predictable because this book is about 5 sisters. I wanted a huge family. I remember watching and rewatching the Cheaper by the Dozen films when I was a kid and just wanting like an army of siblings to like terrorize my parents with. Not necessarily terrorize, I wasn't like an evil kid, but I just loved those scenes where like one of the little ones was getting bullied and like, you know, the bully was like, what are you gonna do about it? And then the camera would pan out and then all of their older siblings would be there like, hey, that's my brother, or whatever. And I remember just being like, yeah! Can you tell I was bullied at school? Is that really obvious? I just wanted older siblings to beat up my bullies, okay? But yeah, this book follows Dixie, Rochelle, Jude, and Martine, the Diamond Girls. They have such cool names. They might sound like a girl band, but these sisters' lives are anything but glamorous. And this book follows the sisters as their mum is pregnant and she's about to give birth to another little diamond baby, and it just follows the ups and downs of a new baby coming into the house, disrupting the dynamic between all the sisters and their mum coping as a single mum. I think you'd struggle to find a happily married couple in a Jacqueline Wilson book. It's either a single mother or a single father. There's no in between. And what I love about this book is that the new baby turns out to be a boy. Shock, horror, and all of the girls are very shook. I mean, I relate. Imagine a man coming into your space. How rude. I remember this being so lovely, and even though Jacqueline Wilson books can be quite bleak, there's so much heart and love in them, and that's what she aims to do. She always talks about wanting, you know, to uplift kids but also not lie about like things that are difficult, and to talk about things like that in her books, like kids that are disadvantaged, kids that are on the breadline. And that's something else I actually want to highlight, because I think in all of my videos talking about Wilsathon, I'm obviously very excited because I love returning to my childhood. I love nostalgic things. I always rewatch the same films over and over and over again, and Jacqueline Wilson was such a huge part of my childhood and my teenhood, and I was obviously very excited to return to that. And they do bring up a lot of happy memories for me, a lot of, you know, holidays where I would take her books with me. I would always take her books to my grand's so that I could read them there. And I remember I took one of her books, How to Survive Summer Camp, with me on a summer camp when I was really scared to go on my own and be away from home for the first time. So her books provided a lot of comfort and joy in my life. But her books aren't all sweetness and light. They touch on a lot of really difficult topics, and this is a really bad time for my leg to go to sleep. Bloody hell, ow. And so many of her characters are in really dire circumstances, either with parents that can or won't look after them, or parents that want to do their best for them but they just don't have money or the circumstances, or they have mental health disorders or physical health disorders. And me and the host were talking about how we think that reading Jacqueline Wilson as a child really impacted like our political and moral compass. Because I had a fairly privileged childhood, like we always had a roof over our head. I never had to worry about where my next meal was coming from. I always felt safe and loved, and I always, you know, got books that I wanted. And Jacqueline Wilson books were the windows into the lives of children who didn't get what they wanted, and children who were hurting. And from an early age they really exposed that, you know, not everyone lives life in the same way. Like, I think these books were a lesson in empathy and privilege, and about how, you know, people can try their best and still things are kind of stacked against them. And that is getting quite political, but these books are political. Like, you can't separate the happy nostalgia from the really important messages of these books, that there are a huge number of families living under the poverty line in Britain, which is the 5th richest country in the world or something, and Jacqueline Wilson has never strayed from portraying the lives of those people with so much empathy and love. And I think that that's so important for kids to see, because I might not necessarily meet kids like that or kids from disadvantaged backgrounds in school, and so it's so important to learn about kind of unfairness and cruelty and poverty in a way that is safe and also enjoyable and accessible. I just think these books are so important. I went on a bit of a tangent there. I hope it makes sense. But yeah, as much as these books are happy and joyful and nostalgic, they're also really important, and I'm so glad that Jacqueline Wilson is still writing and that kids, you know, for generations will have her books. Yeah, just a wonderful, wonderful author. The next book I want to talk about is The Illustrated Mum, and this kind of perfectly illustrates, see what I did there, perfectly illustrates the point that I just made about the importance of representation in children's books, because this follows Star and Dolphin's mum, who has bipolar disorder. And I definitely didn't know what bipolar was when I read this as a kid, and I just knew that their mum struggled with day-to-day things and it wasn't anything physical, but that she loved them still and they loved her. And it was just such a wonderful story of love. I think Jacqueline Wilson vocalizes and verbalizes things for children when they don't know what that is yet. And this is definitely one of those books. I remember completely adoring this, and I should have put this on my fucking TBR, shouldn't I? Maybe I'll read it anyway. But again, another little out of context detail that I remember from this book is Star and her sister Dolphin going up to London to Hamleys and looking at all of the dolls. And you know, Jacqueline Wilson does her very beautiful descriptions of every little doll and what toys they pick and what they want and what they're looking at, and you can just feel it and breathe it, and like they just stick in your head for literal years. I read this like probably over 10 years ago, and I can still vividly picture that scene when they're in the aisle of Hamleys and like Star is looking up at all the different things that she wants, and oh, it's just wonderful. Another book that I didn't know whether or not I was going to put on here, but I found it when I was looking for the other books that I've just talked about, and so I just picked it up, and it's Midnight. And this was a really strange one because, again, I very clearly remember certain scenes in this one, and it's about this girl Violet, and she has an older brother and she has quite a fractious relationship with him. And then there's this shocking scene that I was so shocked, where she's in her house, I believe, and I think she's looking for a friend of hers, or she's looking for somebody, and then she goes into a room and then she sees her older brother like kissing her, I think it's her friend, and it's just like a gut punch, and she just feels like, one, just so left out and alienated and shocked, and it just, oh, I remember that just gutting me for some reason. I don't even know what the context was, but I just remember being so shocked, because I think also this is probably the first time I'd ever had kissing in a book, but I just remember being like, what? And another element of this book is that Violet loves this author called Casper Dream, and he writes books about fairies and wonderful magical things, and Violet really covets these books and they're her escape from her day-to-day, and she really wants to meet this author, and I think she ends up meeting them and it just doesn't live up to her expectations. And I remember this being quite a sad book. Again, I don't remember a lot of the kind of plot details, it's just very specific moments that stick out in my head, and when I was looking at my books to kind of do this video, this one just sprang out at me, so I definitely want to return to this one too at some point. I'm just realizing now that like so many of my favorites are just purple. Like, is that the theme here? Is that the correlation? Is that why they're good? Does Nick Sharratt just reserve the colour purple for Jacqueline Wilson's best books? Maybe. And the purple theme brings us right on to the last one, which is Love, Frankie, which I've talked about very recently on my channel because I treated myself to a beautiful signed edition of Love, Frankie for Christmas, and I read it around Christmas time, which was perfect because this book actually begins at Christmas, and it's set over kind of Christmas and the weeks after. And this is about a young girl called Frankie who thinks that she's falling in love with her female best friend, and you know, figuring out what that might mean and how her sisters will react to the potential news that she is gay and what that means just for her at school and in her life. And it's just a wonderful book. Again, it's that classic Jacqueline Wilson thing of being joyful and wonderful and celebrating love and who you are and strength and family, but then also not shying away from the kind of darker moments and like the fear and the anxiety and, you know, being a kid and being kind of hopeless and still having to part with certain family members that might not understand or might not accept you. And oh, it's just wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And my last kind of honourable mention is Jackie Daydream, and I don't actually own this one, but I have the audiobook, and it is one of my most coveted audiobooks ever. I had quite a lot of trouble sleeping when I was a kid, I still do, and I still go to the Jacqueline Wilson audiobook for Jackie Daydream. It is read by her, and it is wonderful. It is so joyful, and in that audiobook she talks about all of her bookish influences, all the books that she read when she was a kid, why she started reading, why she started writing, and where a lot of her stories and her characters came from. Literally all of my Jacqueline Wilson trivia comes from Jackie Daydream, and she has such an expressive reader voice. You can just tell when she's talking about books how much she loves stories and how much she loves characters and people and how much joy they brought to her, and then she brings that joy in turn to the children that she writes for. And what I love about Jackie Daydream is at the end of each chapter she has like a little bit from one of her books or something and then links it back to like a story in her real life. So for example, there's a chapter where little kid Jackie has to go to the big bad hospital to get her tonsils taken out because she keeps getting, you know, bad coughs as a kid, and she writes about, you know, her mum buying her new nighties, buying her a new doll, and how her mum wasn't allowed to visit and having to be sent postcards. And she writes about the kids that were in the beds opposite and how embarrassed she was that her hospital gown was like open at the back, and like what if the boys laughed at her and things like this. I've listened to this audiobook too many times. I know all of the details, but at the end of that chapter she has a little section of like, you know, what character gets her tonsils taken out, or like what character in one of my books, you know, wakes up in hospital or something. And you can see where stories from her real life have fed into her writing over the years, and it's just really magical. And it's just really lovely to hear her tell these stories and then kind of recognize where she's taken inspiration from in her writing. And she also writes a lot about her kind of tricky relationship with her dad, and her dad had a lot of anger issues and he yelled a lot, and she had quite a fractious home life in that sense. You know, her parents didn't get along, and there are lots of books where she writes fathers like that. For example, she mentions that her dad was a direct kind of inspiration for Prue's dad in Love Lessons, and he has a lot of kind of anger fits and bouts of like rage. So yeah, if you're interested in Jacqueline Wilson and her life and her writing process and her ideas and the kind of stories that she likes, I would highly recommend checking out Jackie Daydream, also on audiobook, because she reads it herself and it's just wonderful. So those are all my favourite Jacqueline Wilson books, and honestly I could go back to my shelf and pick out like 5 more and do a video on those. Like, I could talk till the cows come home about Jacqueline Wilson and what an icon she is and how grateful I am for the work that she does and continues to do, but I've talked a lot. I will shut up now. Please let me know in the comments what your favourite Jacqueline Wilson books are. Have you reread them? Do you want to? What ones are calling out to you now as an adult that you might want to revisit? Please let me know. I can't wait to discuss all things Jacqueline Wilson in the comments, and I will see you soon with another video soon. Bye.